Welcome. So we're going to answer this question. The inverse function of this right here is which of the following? Okay, so we know that when we're finding the inverse function, what we do is you swap the x's and the y's. So remember, this is the same as like y is equal to this. So we're just going to swap the x's and y's around. And then you rearrange to solve for y. So that means I can just swap these positions around. The square root of y plus 2 is equal to 1 on x. Then I'll square both sides. Y plus 2 is equal to 1 squared is 1. And if I square the bottom, I'm just left with x squared. And then I subtract 2 away. That's going to be my answer. We look at our options. E is out, D is out, C is out. That means either A or B is my answer. Now you can see what differentiates A and B is my domain. So I need to figure out what the domain of the inverse is. So to answer this question, I need to figure out what the domain of the inverse is. Now, what do I know about the domain of the inverse? I know that the domain of the inverse is just equal to the range of the function. So I need to figure out what the range of this function is. Now, you can graph this, but I also want you to be able to answer it just by thinking it through as well. As you can see here, I have a square root in the denominator. Now, what do you know about square roots? You know that you can't square root a negative number, right? You can't square root a negative number because the whole thing breaks. And you also know, and this is also based on the domain that we're given here, but it's also just a true statement as well. If you square root any number, especially in this form right here, it's always going to give you out a positive result. You know, there's no number you could put in here that isn't going to give you a positive result. For instance, let's just think for a second. If I put -1 into this, so -1 plus 2, what's that going to be equal to? Well, it's going to be equal to 1. And then you square root 1, it's going to be fine. You know, if you put in, I don't know, -0.5, it's still going to be positive. All these numbers here are going to be positive. The output's going to be positive here. Now, 1 divided by a positive number is, wait for it, a positive number. So that means the range of this is always going to be positive. It's going to always be positive. Now, if you look at B, this is saying that the range would sometimes be negative because this is saying all real numbers, just not 0. So this includes the negative numbers. But can you see how you could never get a negative number out of this? It just doesn't make any sense. This whole thing here will always give you out positive numbers. So that means it has to be A. Now, if you're kind of thinking to yourself, whoa, that's kind of confusing that you've figured out that this is all real positive numbers, and you're thinking, I'm concerned I wouldn't get that in an exam. What you could do is you could sketch it. So you could come here, we could go tab, and we could go, all right, 1 over this x plus 2. And it just so happens that this graphs nicely on the CAS. And as you can see, I've got an asymptote, so it's slowly approaching x, but it never gets there. And you can see that the range of this is just all my positive numbers, So it has to be A. There are no part of the range in which I'm getting negative y values there. Okay, hopefully that made sense, and I'll see you later.